Hey, Brother Micheal. This is
Hey,
our
brother.
first brother who walked with Amen. And he met Amen when he was just walking with one sister, Sister Cher. And he has famous stories amongst the family.
Yeah.
And he really, for years, he was an example that we all were thankful for faith and are today. Hey, Micheal.
Hey, brother. How are you? How are you? How are you being?
Praising Amen. Thank you,
Amen.
Father.
Amen. Yeah.
So I'm just going to let you ramble, but I thought you could start off by describing how you met Amen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, that goes back a little ways. It was 1969, and I was out on the road traveling, and I was looking for what I was supposed to do for my work. I was 25, 26 years old, and I was out on the road, and I stopped at this rest area, Southern California, about 10 miles out of Winter Haven, California. And I had camped there for a day or so, and I was on my way, and there was a car in the off ramp, on the on ramp going onto the freeway, and they had a flat tire. So I stopped and I offered to help them change the flat tire. So I was down changing the flat tire, and all of a sudden I hear this car pull up alongside, and I turn around and I look, and the driver's he's one man in a car, and he looks at me, and his eyes are real big, and he looks at me and he says, "Do you know where Jesus Christ is camped at?" And my mind opened up like there was no time. It was spatial. I said, Jesus Christ, it was, but he was here 2,000 years ago, but in the moment, he was right there in the present. And I loved that feeling. And I told the brother, I said, if you'll wait a minute, brother, let me finish this flat tire and I'll go help you find him. So that's what we did. And he and I drove into Yuma and went past over the bridge into Yuma. And we said, where do you think Jesus might be? And I don't know, maybe at the Harley shop or a motorcycle shop. Well, we parked on the street across the street from this thrift store, and we sat there and we're looking, and all of a sudden this big hippie bus pulls up, and the door opens, and all these hippies pile out into the thrift store. I said, that's my clue right there. So I went into the thrift store and I walked up to one of the brothers and I said, hey, brother, you happen to know where Jesus Christ is camped at? And the brother looked at me. It was Bartholomew, is who the brother was. He says, yeah, we're camped right next to Jesus. I said, well, can you take me to him? He says, yeah, we'll take you to him. So he did. We followed them out to Laguna Dam and out where the camping places were. And there Bartholomew and his mom and his brothers were all camped in this old building with a big hole in the wall. So they became known as the Hole in the Wall Gang. Well, I camped with them. And the next morning, I'm sitting on the tailgate of my truck, and I look up and I'm kind of contemplating. I'm thinking, where I got to get some work, make a little money here. But I'm looking for Jesus now, and I look up and here comes two people walking down the path, and I'm looking at them, and and they have a dog with them, and the dog's just coming towards me. They're not angry or anything. And I look, and here's two people, and I look at them, and they're both barefoot, and they've got like cut off Levi's on, and an army blanket over the shoulder and a sleeping bag. And that's it.
No shirt.
No shirt. Well, the woman had a shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus didn't have a shirt on. And they're walking, they're getting closer and closer and closer, and I'm watching them both, man, and I just feel myself being filled with good feeling, man. And they walk up and I say, hey, how are you doing, brother? And sister? And Amen says, hey brother, hey brother. And he baptized me. He says, today's your day. He says, no killing, no sex, and no materialism. And I went off. That was the answer that I'd been looking for a couple of years, traveling to all the communes and all the gurus up and down the West Coast. And there was the answer, plain and simple, just three words. And I said, yeah. I said, can I camp with you? And they said, sure, yeah, come on over. So they walked over and I followed them in my truck and we went to their camp. And I wound up sitting there for 5 days. And we would have our resting place. We'd get up in the morning and we'd move over to a place where we would have coffee and a little bite to eat in the morning, stay there until the afternoon, and then sit in another place. And in the evening, come back. 3 places we sat, and then we got in our sleeping bags for 5 days. And he just talked. He just revelated, and I was way gone. I was in heaven. I felt like it. And then the time came where he said, well, now you got to get into uniform. I said, okay, all right. So she says, well, stand up, Micheal. And I stood up, and she had a scissors, and I had Levi's on, and she went and snipped the legs on my Levi's off, and so there I was in my cut off Levi's, and she made up a bedroll strap and hooked it up to my bedroll, and then Jesus says to me, he says, well, Micheal, he says, now that you're here, we can get to work. He says, tag, you're it. I had no idea what he was talking about. I said, what? I don't think I said anything. I was just agreeing with him. Okay, what kind of work are we going to do? And he says, well, I sent a couple of brothers off to Florida, and I'm kind of wondering about them. And why don't you take a walk to Florida and see what they're up to? I says, oh, okay. Wow, he says, and I want to tell you something. He says, when the further away from me physically you become, the further you get away from me, the closer you'll get to me. I started thinking, opposite, right? It's opposite of what, and then I said, spirit. And he was telling me the truth. So they got me all prepared, all set up and everything, barefoot and everything. And he says, okay, Mike, on your way to Florida, 3,000 miles. And he says, don't hitchhike.
Mm-hmm. And you're barefoot.
Barefoot, oh yeah, barefoot. Tenderfoot. Mm-hmm. Tenderfoot. Just took my shoes and...
Did he say no money? Don't touch money?
Well, when they cut off my Levi's, and then Cher says, Micheal, she says, pull out your pockets from your Levi's like this. And I said, okay. I pulled them out. She got the scissors and she cut the pocket out of my Levi's. I said, well, what's the reasoning behind that? Amen said, you'll find out down the road a lot of things. So I had no pockets in my jeans. I went, I, when I got on down the road, just quickly, Gary, when I saw something on the ground that I liked, a rock or something, and I picked it up and I looked at it. I said, that's a nice rock. And I put it in my pocket. And the revelation came when the rock came out of my pocket and bounced down on my leg and on the ground. And I realized that was an example of no materialism and how we're so addicted to that stuff and don't even realize it. But that's how simple he made the revelation. So I went on my way, but I got out on the highway there at Laguna Dam, and I hit the highway, and I'm walking along. I'm barefoot, but I'm a tenderfoot, and I'm walking along, and I'm feeling zippity-doo-dah, I'm feeling the marching music, and I'm zippity-doo-dah, dippity-day, and all of a sudden this sheriff's car pulls right up next to me and in front of me, blocks my way. The sheriff gets out and he says, uh-huh. He says, you're one of those people who don't eat meat. You're a vegetarian. He says, you're under arrest, and I'm taking you straight to jail, and you're going to eat meat before you leave my jail. I was challenged right away. I didn't like the dude. I didn't like what he was saying, and I said, okay, you've got a contest going here. And so he did. He took me to Winter Haven jail, inside the little jail, and that's where I sat for 3 days. And he'd bring me my hamburgers from across the street, and I'd turn them down, and I wore them out. Amen, wore them out, But I was persistent. I didn't like him, so I wasn't gonna. And I was fasting, and I enjoyed fasting. So 3 days later, he comes in, and he's all sulking, and he says, "Okay, you're going now." And I didn't, pick on him for losing. I just was happy to be on my way. He put me in the car, drove me across the bridge into Yuma, and I opened the door and get out, and he says, "And don't come back, and don't come back." I said, "Psh, God's will, and I'm out of here." And he turns around, goes back to Winter Haven. And I take 10 steps, and this car pulls up next to me, and it's Mariah. Never met her before. She had heard that I was in jail. The grapevine had from Amen, and that found out that I was in jail. I wasn't out of the police car 15 minutes, and she picks me up, took me home, and gave me a big vegetarian meal, and I'm already revelating. I'm on my way. And from there, from Yuma, I took off for Florida, and that's the beginning of my story.
Was Amen using the name Amen?
No, he was Jesus. No, he was Jesus Christ. And he had been up that summer. He had been all the way up to Seattle. He and Cher, and they worked their way all the way down the West Coast of preaching. And the fellow that I met who came up to me and said, "Do you know where Jesus Christ?" He had heard Jesus preaching in People's Park in Berkeley, and he was moved, and he drove all the way to Southern California looking for him.
Wow!
So he was the messenger, and salvation comes through hearing. And that moment when he said, "Do you know where Jesus Christ is?" That was the trigger word that I guess had been set up in my being from the beginning. I don't know when, but that was what Amen set up, to have that communication. And And oh man, that was exactly what I was looking for. So that was it, and then that started me off on my way. And then I was 15 years. Uh, the first Gary, I said I was gonna. I said to myself, well, it's my ego talking. I'm only gonna. I'll hang out here a year and see how it goes, and then I might be on my way. By the end of the first year, I was long gone, man. That's when I met Miriam and my little sister Naomi. All repented, in the second year I was on the road, and you know how it is on the road. I understood why why Jesus said, you don't have to put your thumb out. You're working for God. He knows where you are. You can take a nap by the side of the road. If I want you to meet this person, he's going to pull over and you don't even know why he's pulling over. And he'll come wake you up. And then that happened in one of the 3,000 miles of miracles. Man. Yeah, so
Amen.
amen. Amen to that. That's how I got started.